He was my only son, and on the day he sent me to relax, I stood on my own porch and heard his voice through speakerphone plotting my death. One-way ticket, forged DNR, a midnight slip from a balcony, tearing open a wound so deep it replaced love with something colder. Resolve. Dad won't feel a thing if the railing does the work. Before we dive into today's story, let us know where you're watching from. And as you watch, don't just sit back. Be part of the experience. If a moment grabs your attention, whether it's powerful, unexpected, or deeply moving, drop a comment with a timestamp of that scene and share your thoughts. Your reactions bring the story to life, and we love seeing which moments resonate with you the most. And if you haven't already, hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a new story. Now, grab a coffee or tea, settle in, and let's begin. The damp air comes in low over the bay and settles in my garage the way fine dust settles inside an old carburetor. Quietly, inevitably. I've lived long enough to know what sticks and what doesn't. At 67, my hands still remember every torque spec I ever taught, even if my left knuckle complains when the weather turns. Bellingham has a way of rinsing a man down to metal. Out here, mornings smell like wet cedar and cold steel, and the roof sings a soft pinging hymn when the drizzle picks up. I was swapping an air filter on Mrs. Ullman's beaten-up pickup when my wrist locked for half a second. I leaned back, breathed through the pinch, and waited for the joint to unspool. Habit, more than pain. The truck is older than the freshman I used to train at the high school shop, all cracked hoses and loyal noises. I prefer machines that don't lie about how close they are to failing. The house behind me holds its breath the way houses do after the person who made them warm is gone. Claire's scarf still hangs on the back of the chair by the window, a loop of faded blue I can't convince myself to move. 3 years and the scarf keeps watch. Grief isn't a storm you outlast. It's a climate you learn to work within, like the coastal fog that never fully burns off. Grant started calling again this spring, every few nights at first, then most weekends. We have a way of speaking like we're passing sockets back and forth, functional, light on eye contact. Distance became our family language after Claire died. Lately, he's been warmer. He asks about my sleep, my blood pressure, whether I'm staying social. Elise texts me articles about heart-healthy diets and sends a box of vitamins that clatter cheerfully when I nudge them on the counter. Attention from your grown child is a sweet thing, even if it arrives with packaging that doesn't quite feel like it was meant for you. They showed up together on a Sunday with rain freckles on their coats and the kind of practice smiles you bring to holidays. Grant had a silver envelope pinched between 2 fingers like a tuxedo accessory. "We thought you could use a break," he said. "A real one." Away from grease and timelines, Elise tapped the envelope and grinned. "Open it, Dad." Inside, glossy cardstock and a stylized compass rose. An Alaska Inside Passage cruise departing Seattle on the Northern Crown. Balcony stateroom 7 nights, glaciers like cathedrals, whales surfacing like punctuation. I slid the papers out in order, careful with the edges like they might bruise. My thumb paused over a line that said boarding pass and sailed past a blank space where return flight details usually live. Maybe the travel agent would send the rest after the cruise line processed it. Not everything arrives in one shipment. I know that from chasing parts back when Washington's supply chain turned to molasses. Grant squeezed my shoulder with a gentleness I didn't recognize from his teenage years. "You need to get out of town, Dad. Breathe some cold air. Hit reset." I nodded because I could feel the garage soaking in the moment like oil into concrete. "I'll miss the shop for a week," I said, and heard myself sounding pleasant. Elise laughed. "You'll miss it for 3 days, and then you'll be taking pictures of mountains like a teenager." We had coffee at the kitchen table. Claire used to claim my coffee could remove paint. Elise brought a small bag of something light-roasted and optimistic that smelled like a hiking store. We spoke about brochures and fleece layers and whether formal night still means a tie on cruise ships. Grant's eyes softened when I said I'd take the photo of Claire in my wallet. "She wanted to see Alaska," I said. We talked about it sometimes. We always pushed it out for a better time. Then go for both of you, he said, and the line landed the way a wrench lands in a clean hand, just right. After they left, I wiped the table twice more than necessary and laid the documents out on a towel from the drawer. It felt like prepping gaskets, lining pieces up exactly as they'd need to be when the engine starts. I still keep a small spiral notebook by the phone. I wrote the ship's name, cabin number, departure date, and a reminder to pick up motion sickness tablets even though Boats and I have an uneasy truce. Under that, without thinking, I jotted, "Check travel email for return." Then I crossed it out with one line because a man doesn't need to make homework out of a gift. In the garage, the rain gathered energy. I took a photo of the cruise ticket and texted it to an old friend, Damon Cho. He left the department a decade ago and learned how to invoice people for finding the truths they couldn't put words to. We play chess with our silences. Sometimes he sends me photos from fly fishing trips where the fish look like small secrets. "Look at me," I typed, "finally going somewhere without a socket set." He replied in under a minute, "Try not to tighten the ocean, Noel," and sent a thumbs up. I smiled despite myself and slid the phone into my flannel pocket. There's a particular tension I know well, the one right before you test a bolt at spec. Too loose and it will rattle itself free. Too tight and you'll strip the threads and curse yourself for hurrying. Life is full of torque moments that nobody marks in foot-pounds. You feel them with your palm and your patience. An old shop teacher knows the difference between resistance and refusal. I walk the perimeter of the house, a habit I picked up when sleep became a slower visitor. The fence needs a new hinge. The rosemary by the step needs cutting back. In the living room, I took Claire's scarf down and shook it once, just to move the air through it, then placed it back. I held the cruise papers up next to her photograph, measuring a week against 3 years, glaciers against a kitchen full of quiet. "Yes," I said, testing the word on the tongue. "Yes, I'll go." The roof answered with a sharper tapping, as if the rain approved. I turned the lights off in the garage and listened to the click of cooling metal. Somewhere out on the bay, a gull threw its single note into the fog like a coin tossed at chance. I folded the silver envelope, slid it into the drawer with my passport, and imagined the ship cutting a clean line through water so green it looks made, the balcony door sliding open on an evening I haven't earned yet. Machines run better when they're used. Maybe men do too. Tomorrow I'll make a list and lay out socks and the heavy sweater Claire loved on me. Tonight I'll let the house be a house and the rain be rain. The trip is a week, the decision is a step. I take it and the floor holds. I was halfway to the highway when I tapped my breast pocket and felt nothing but shirt. Reading glasses. I swung the truck around, eased back into the driveway, and cut the engine. The house sat in its usual hush, but from inside came a thin, bright voice, riding speakerphone echo the way a drill whines when it hits metal. "My son." Phrases leapt out between room acoustics and the whisper of rain. "One-way booking. Already submitted the DNR. Railing at night makes sense." The words fitted themselves together without my help, like gears finding their teeth. I didn't breathe. I didn't move. The porch smelled of wet cedar and something coppery, as if the air itself had a memory. Training is a muscle. I let the first stab of panic pass the way I teach a stuck bolt to pass. Steady wrist, patient pressure, no sudden torque. I opened the door softly, stepped in like a guest, and took the glasses from the dish by the keys. My boots made no comment. The call inside the house kept flowing, softer now, as if it knew I'd heard enough. I stepped out again as if I'd forgotten nothing, as if the world hadn't tilted. In the truck, I took out the old flip phone Damon once called my rainy day burner, flipped it open, and dialed his number from memory. "Damon," I said, keeping my voice jam-nut tight, "check Lucas's money, crypto margin, sports betting, anything with my name. Look for any power of attorney. Don't text my main phone." He said copy and left it there, which is why I trust him. I pointed the truck south. A lesser man might cancel the trip. A younger man might storm the front door with questions. I am neither. If there is a plan aimed at me, I need to see the shape of it from the inside, where seams show and shortcuts squeak. Torque moments don't tolerate guessing. I told myself what I tell kids around a lift: the safest path isn't always the nearest exit. Sometimes it's the route that keeps you under the camera and out of the blind spot. At Pier 91, the Northern Crown rose white and confident against a pewter sky. Boarding is a choreography of smiles and plastic. I watched angles. Cameras watched me back from corners and soffits, polite cyclopses. In the cabin, the balcony door slid with a cat's grace, glass framed in brushed aluminum. Out past the railing, the water wore the color of old bottle glass. I leaned in, then stopped. No lens looked there. Public spaces stared. Private edges didn't. I took the emergency map from behind the door and traced stairs, ladders, cross corridors. 2 fire doors down to the left, 1 service stair behind the ice machine, a dead patch by the midship elevator where the ceiling domes were ornamental, not ocular. I wrote them in my notebook, block letters, no flourish. I found the library because ships still believe in libraries, even if most of the pages glow. I paid for 10 minutes of internet and spent 2. Location tagging off, photo backups off. No autofill. A single line to Damon from a webmail I only used to renew tool warranties. Aboard, safe, proceed. I closed every tab, wiped my prints on the plastic wrist rest like a superstition, and left by a different door. At the afternoon safety drill, I stood under the green man running toward the arrow and measured the time from cabin to muster station in half-speed steps. If fear is a tide, habits are sandbags. The buffet smelled like citrus and salt. I carried a tray like it might scald and looked for a small table that thought of itself as a large table. She reached it first, setting down a bowl of soup with the ease of someone who served 1,000 bowls to hands that shake. Silver hair tidy, eyes that audit a room faster than they judge it. "Sit," she said, not unkindly. "You look like someone who knows when coffee is burnt." I smiled and sat. "Name's Patricia O'Neill," she added. "Some people still call me Trish." "I see you 30 years," I said, "Nolan," and watched her catalog me. Age, posture, trimmer, foot placement. She didn't ask about my heart. She asked if I carried my meds with me when I roamed. "Yes," I said. "Good," she answered. I kept my story on the short leash a shop dog respects. "First cruise," I said, "not much for boats." "I prefer 4 tires and a clear lane." She stirred her soup. "Boats prefer predictability," she said. "So do older men who pretend not to." She looked past me, over my shoulder, then back. "If something feels off," she said, "pick a word and tell me." "I can reach the medical desk and, if necessary, the officer of the watch," I nodded. "Blue scarf," I said, surprising myself with the choice. "Claire's scarf exists the way a lighthouse exists, all warning and welcome." "Blue scarf," Trish repeated exactly once, as if committing to a chart. Insurance against chance is a stack, not a single paper. After dinner, I walked the outer deck in a loop and declined 2 smiling offers of cocktails because free is the most expensive price on a boat. I counted the life buoys because counting calms the mind and offends no one. Back in the cabin, I laid the documents on the desk like parts on a shop rag. Boarding pass, cabin assignment, dinner seating, a tasteful packet about glaciers. Where the return flight information should live, the design offered a pleasant silence. I took a photo with my old flip phone, even though the grain would make it look like proof from another decade. I didn't call guest services. Not yet. Predators reveal themselves when they think their story will be believed. My job tonight was to sleep and rehearse calm. I set the diver's whistle on the nightstand and wedged a folded card under the balcony latch. A trick an old sailor showed me to make a whisper into a shout if a door moves. I texted Damon one more time. "Tomorrow I'll verify paper." Watch for noise on his accounts. The reply didn't come, which meant good work or careful work, both acceptable. I turned off the light and listened to the ship explain itself to the sea in long mechanical sentences. Somewhere above, a couple laughed with the bravery of new itineraries. I closed my eyes and pictured a green corridor between walls of ice and the narrow, exact line between caution and fear. In the morning, I would walk to guest services and ask a question I already knew the answer to. Morning came thin and gray, the kind of sky that makes metal look thoughtful. I'd slept in short bursts, waking to the soft thrum of engines and the gentle tap of hangers ticking in the closet. Resolve rides easier than rest when you've decided to walk into a plan that isn't yours. I pocketed my notebook, the old flip phone, and the worn wallet with Claire's picture, then set out with the single purpose a mechanic trusts: verify, document, and leave no loose threads. Guest services was a bright aquarium of smiles and lanyards. I queued under a ceiling camera on purpose, hands visible, posture steady. When it was my turn, I met a young agent whose badge read Alyssa. I asked, pleasant as a customer service brochure, for a printed, complete itinerary. Her keyboard clattered, soft taps, then a longer pause, then the little mouth-shape people make when something doesn't fit. She lowered her voice, defensive for me. "Sir, your booking shows embarkation only. I'm not seeing a return flight attached." The words didn't surprise me, but they put weight into my bones the way a jack does under a frame. I asked her to print everything: record locator, payment name, system timestamp. She obliged, slid pages across, and stamped the top sheet with the desk seal. Grant's name sat on the payer line like a signature on a verdict. I asked about flights home after the ship's last port. She scrolled, called up an airline matrix, and recommended a Sunday 3 p.m. departure with a short connection. I paid with my own card, slow and deliberate, as if handing over a part number I'd triple-checked. She printed the e-ticket receipt and wrote the boarding reference in block letters. When she offered to email it, I agreed, but didn't rely on it. Outside the line, I took a photo of the receipt with the flip phone. Grainy proof is still proof. In the corner by the atrium plants, I slid all of it into a waterproof folder and wrote in my notebook, "One-way confirmed. Return purchased by me. Do not disclose." The first text from my son landed as I walked away, a breezy check-in about my sleep and whether the top-deck wind made me dizzy. The wording angled gently toward railings and night air. I replied non-committally, the verbal equivalent of tapping a tire without committing to the tread depth. Later, my daughter-in-law called with a syrupy warmth that skimmed the surface without touching water. She hit the same phrases Grant had used: disconnect, reset, relax, as if they'd rehearsed a brand for my benefit. I hung up and wrote mirrored phrasing in the margin next to the confirmation stamp's ink halo. Because cameras remember what eyes forget, I took a seat on a lobby bench under a visible lens and read the itinerary pages as if for the first time, angling the stamped header toward the glass eye. I spoke a few lines out loud at a natural volume. Dates, cabin, no return listed, not for drama, but so the audio might pair with the picture later if anyone needed to reconstruct my day. Papers back in the folder, folder back inside my jacket, jacket zipper up. Chain of custody isn't just for labs. At lunch, I found Trish at the edge of the buffet where light hit stainless steel like a clean warning. I didn't dump the whole story in her lap. She's earned better than to be made a confessor by a stranger. I simply said the return hadn't been included and I'd taken care of it myself. She measured my face like a pulse and gave me short counsel about footing and glassy eyes. We fixed a quiet protocol. If I texted the words blue scarf, she'd route it to the places aboard where alarms don't sound like panic. A life can be saved by 5 seconds of the right message to the right person, she said. I believed her. The ship offered a complimentary cocktail hour and kind hands extended flutes with a sales smile hidden inside. I refused with practiced courtesy. Free is often the most expensive thing a man can accept when he needs his head clear. Moving through the decks, I chose paths with obvious cameras, skipped the cozy corridor near the midship elevator where the ceiling domes were decorative instead of watchful, and logged distances the way runners log miles. On the windward side, the flooring held a feel I didn't like, grit over something slick, and the rail hit just below my lowest rib. I wrote measurements in the notebook like they were torque specs because for my purposes they were. Evening eased in with blue that turned every window into a screen. My mind went to Claire the way a hand goes to a familiar wrench, without looking. She had wanted glaciers, the big slow truths of ice and light. I let the ache move through me and then set it aside, the way you set aside nostalgia when someone else has put a price on your remaining days. Love isn't less real for being bracketed by practical steps. It might be more real when you honor it with practical steps. Another text from Grant arrived before lights out, concern dressed as instruction. Don't stay out late on deck, the night wind makes older folks wobbly. The sentence clicked into place with a dozen others that tried to make an accident plausible before it happened. I wedged a folded card into the balcony latch so movement would whisper loudly enough to wake me. I set the small diver's whistle on the nightstand within 2 fingers' reach. The folder went under the pillow like a child's treasure, not because of sentiment, but because the pillow is the last thing a stranger expects to search. I sent Damon a final message for the day, one-way verified, return purchased. Keep digging for power of attorney and credit anomalies. I didn't call the desk again or ask any helpful employee to explain away what I already knew. Predators thrive on soft corners and undocumented days. I wanted edges and timestamps. I turned off the lamp and let the engines tell their steady story. Somewhere overhead, a brass band practiced a hopeful measure and failed it twice before getting it right. I smiled in the dark. Tomorrow would be a day for following shadows, but tonight I'd done the work that turns fear into a file. By the second afternoon, I'd traded nerves for a plan. Verification was done. Now came controlled pressure, the kind you apply with a torque wrench when you need a stuck fastener to announce what metal it's married to. I walked the public decks with my notebook folded to a fresh page, measuring sight lines, noting every black eye of a ceiling camera and the thin ellipses where the coverage overlapped. If the sea wanted me, it would have to take a number and wait in line behind my procedures. Trish met me near the atrium bar with a nod physicians use when there's information but no reason to scare a man prematurely. We mapped our stage, casino floor, bar by the main staircase, and the breezeway to the outdoor deck. All angles had lenses, all exits ran past witnesses. If something turns, she said quietly, text the word. I said blue scarf. She repeated it once like a nurse confirming a dose, then stepped off to a poker table where she could watch without seeming to. I took a stool by a bank of slot machines and asked the bartender for a mimosa without the mimosa, ice and orange juice in a flute. The trick isn't to play drunk, it's to suggest the soft edges that tempt a predator into thinking you'll tip yourself. I stood a touch too quickly, sank a touch too slowly, let my knees talk to the carpet. I mumbled to no one in particular about the swell and let my hand brush the armrest as if it had become necessary equipment. He arrived on light feet, wearing an olive softshell that said outdoors but not labor. Early 40s, hair trimmed with clippers that had seen recent duty, smile calibrated to the half-worried kindness strangers perform on cruises. First time, he asked, angling himself just outside the machine's chrome reflection and just outside the ceiling camera's cone. I set my glass down and looked delighted to be noticed. First time, I said. Gift from my boy. Balcony and all that. He chuckled like we shared a joke about extravagance. Balcony's nice, he said. Wind can be something, though. Railings feel lower at night, I let a wince flicker and answered, I hate heights. 8th floor, cabin 847. I may avoid the deck after dark. The number hung there like baited wire. He absorbed it with a nod, eyes not leaving mine, while his attention rummaged through my sentences. We chatted about nothing for another minute. Ports neither of us had visited, whales neither of us had seen, and then I excused myself as if the restroom had called my name. I followed the spine of cameras toward the elevators. Behind me, the softshell ghosted along at a courteous distance, not crowding, not losing me. I took the left car. He took the right when it opened, the way men who tail for a fee avoid sharing air with their subject. Trish, 2 tables and a hallway back, drifted after him like a woman reconsidering dessert. On the 8th floor, I turned toward my hallway, but stopped at the ice machine and counted to 30. When I stepped out again, I saw him cruise past my door and keep going until the corridor's curve hit him. I continued the other way, slow as someone remembering where they left their key. When I returned later, a beige card lay under my door, a reminder from the ship's medical center suggesting I bring a complete list of cardiac medications to a consult I had not requested. I held it by its clean corner and studied the font like it might confess. Someone off stage wanted a paper trail that said I was a poor candidate for railings. Down in the breezeway, 2 decks below, a line of phones still clung to the wall for traditionalists. That was where Trish would later tell me she'd paused long enough to hear a quick, low call. 847, 8th floor balcony, says he's scared of the rail. Perfect. The voice gave nothing else away. The words gave everything away that mattered. Down in the breezeway, 2 decks below, a line of phones still clung to the wall for traditionalists. That was where Trish would later tell me she'd paused long enough to hear a quick, low call. 847, 8th floor balcony, says he's scared of the rail. Perfect! The voice gave nothing else away. The words gave everything away that mattered. Back in her orbit, I let her read my face before I spoke. "We've got a watcher," I said, "olive jacket." Polite, she didn't look surprised. She looked like triage. "Then we tighten our side," she said. We did. I photographed the door card on the hallway carpet, the wall phone bank, the bend where the corridor loses its lens. I used the flip phone because it doesn't outthink me with cloud tricks and geotags. I wrote a description on the notebook line beneath the photo time. Height within an inch, build within 5 pounds, age within a decade, and the sentence he'd thrown me like chum. Trish asked to see my patient portal on the ship's app. She tapped with the economy of a person who has saved lives by not missing checkboxes and frowned. "There's a DNR in your file," she said, voice neutral the way professionals are when words should be nails, not flames. "It was uploaded from a guest account that looks like your daughter-in-law's email. No physician counter-signature. In a crisis, it could delay compressions while they verify." I felt my pulse go high and tight, like a belt that skipped a groove. "Print it," I said. She did more. She captured the metadata, upload time, uploader ID, record version, and printed a copy with a timestamp from the ward terminal. Then she slid it into the inner pocket of her cardigan and patted it once. "Chain of custody," she said, and I nearly laughed at the comfort of hearing our languages rhyme. I did not sleep in 847 that night. My door stayed locked, my balcony stayed empty, and my essentials moved into Trish's suite, where a couch folded into an honest bed that had only ever been called a couch to pretend it wasn't a bed. We rigged simple tells, a sliver of tape across her door seam, a hotel card wedged into each slider so any movement would fall and speak, a pen line on the soap wrapper to record whether strangers had hands. I plotted a loop for evening walks that grazed cameras like a parade route. Comfort took a back seat to coverage. Damon got a tighter text. "Tracker on board." Likely name unknown, call him Olive. DNR uploaded via Elise's account. Cross-check Elise for POA attempts and crypto links. I didn't mention the medical center card, not yet. I like to feed a man one clear task at a time. Night turned the hallways into soft rivers of carpet and brass. I lay on Trish's couch with the folder under my pillow and my whistle where my fingers could close on it blind. The anger came and went, a weather system with lightning out past the bay. It would be a mistake to let it run the next hour. A better use for electricity was the idea that announced itself so calmly I nearly trusted it on the spot. Bring this upstairs, past helpful desks and careful memos, to the captain and the ship's security chief. Make a trap of my door. Make of their cameras a net. The gala tomorrow would offer noise and absence in equal parts. If a man in an olive jacket wanted a clean stage, we would give him one, and the audience he didn't plan for. If you're watching and this is useful, comment number 1 right now so I can see you. Now let's proceed. By morning, the ship had the bright, scrubbed look of a stage set before the curtain. Trish and I walked the length of Deck 5 without speaking, a slow rehearsal to settle the heart. We had paperwork, times, and a story that didn't wobble. What we needed now was a net that could hold when the flailing started. Security kept its office just off the bridge, glass and cool air and the hum of monitored machinery. Captain Alistair Quinn stood easy as a pier post, uniform immaculate, eyes made for distance. Beside him, Lieutenant Serena Morales had the compact, unblinking focus of someone who knows how fast quiet becomes sirens. We set our evidence down like tools on a clean bench, stamped itinerary showing one way, the receipt for the return flight I'd bought myself, the medical center reminder I hadn't requested, Trish's printout of the digital DNR with uploader ID and timestamp, and my notes on the man in the olive softshell. Morales read quickly, lips tight, then started a log with every item, time, and handoff. Quinn looked at me, not past me. "We'll set bait," he said, calm as tide, "but the bait will be safe." Trish added the details of what she'd overheard near the wall phones. Morales sketched a plan on a laminated map with a grease pencil, a hidden camera above my door, another covering the slice of balcony, 2 plainclothes posted at either end of the corridor, and a third ready near the service hatch. She pressed a small panic fob into my palm. "Direct line," she said. 2 seconds to us. The plan fit the ship's rhythms. I would attend the gala like any other man with a rented tux memory, linger in the safe glow of public cameras, then drift out at 11:20 as if fatigue chose for me. Instead of returning to 8:47, I would step into the linen locker with Morales and watch the feed, present but absent, both witness and shadow. Trish would stay in the ballroom, an unobtrusive alibi with the sense to notice who noticed me. Evening laid blue across the atrium. A trio played standards, glassware lifted like small signals. I wore the old charcoal jacket Claire liked and kept sparkling water in my hand. The lenses got what they needed, my face, my schedule, my obvious ordinariness. Near the bar I saw the olive jacket once, then again rearranging its angle to me and to the ceiling eye. He measured distances with a predator's thrift. At 11:20, I let my shoulders sag and excused myself from no one, a man easing toward sleep. The stairwell felt honest, steel underfoot, air cool with ductwork. Inside the linen locker, Morales dimmed the work light and woke the screens. Quinn stood on comms somewhere upriver in the ship, voice low in her earpiece. We watched the rectangle of my hallway, the small circle of balcony glint, the door jamb where hidden glass waited. At 12:05 he arrived, reduced by camera to measurement and intention. Olive softshell, nitrile gloves snapping into place, a universal keycard in a practiced hand. He turned his body to the visible dome and opened my door below its sight line. Not knowing the little black pupil above the jamb watched without blinking. Inside, he swept a pin beam across the bed, then slid the balcony door. The sensor whispered green on Morales' screen. He stepped into the darkness, ran fingers along the top of the rail, squatted to test the deck with his palm, and produced a travel-sized can of lubricant. The can's rattle felt obscene. Morales tapped twice on her mic. The far-end plainclothes moved first, a patient walk that ended in sudden certainty. The second came from the near corner, shoulders turned as if greeting an old friend, then hands arrested and sure. A third blocked the balcony exit. The man said, "Wrong room," with the flat effect of people who have practiced lying more than listening. His pocket produced a set of pics, the can, and a phone that vibrated like a live thing. Chain of custody began before the cuffs cooled. Morales photographed the screen where a thread of messages from my son stacked in unkind clarity. After midnight, no struggle, make it look like a slip from the balcony. Another thread showed scheduled posts tied to Elise's account, a carousel of cute forgetfulness about her father-in-law, a draft obituary and notes as tidy as a grocery list. In the crypto wallet, micro-transfers ticked in from a key secured by Elise's biometrics. Morales mirrored the device to a forensic drive, sealed it with a tag, and logged the time to the minute. Quinn stepped into the hall long enough to look at me on the monitor. "You're not going back there," he said. "We keep control." Ryder Sloan, his name came later, was escorted to the small security cell without theater. Trish texted that the ballroom still shimmered with oblivious laughter. I breathed out for the first time in an hour. Down in the office, the air felt heavier with the truth. Morales read Ryder his rights as if setting torque. Firm, even, correct. He tried a different line. "I just follow instructions," he said. The recorder caught the sentence in full, a little gift for a future room with a seal on the wall. The panic fob in my pocket hummed once when Morales tested it, and I felt a small, practical pride. The tool worked, the system held, the trap closed without drama. Trish's hand found my shoulder. The folder under my arm had more weight than paper should. Relief isn't triumph. It's the absence of one kind of pressure and the presence of another. The proof now had to travel, intact, into the hands that make consequences. We agreed. No calls home tonight. Morning would bring the Coast Guard, imaging reports, and a clean handoff. Then I would speak to my son with the measured language of a man who knows the difference between a bolt that's tight and a bolt that's seized, and what happens when someone tries to cheat that difference. Dawn came pale and utilitarian, a working light flipped on after a long repair. I slept in Trish's suite the way a man sleeps at a bus station, horizontal, vigilant. By 7, the Coast Guard detail stepped aboard, crisp uniforms and clipboards that looked like decisions. Lieutenant Morales walked them through the binders and drives, ticking off times the way a metronome measures tempo. Captain Quinn signed the transfer with a fountain pen that left a deep, unsentimental line. Chain of custody intact from corridor camera to security cell to sealed evidence bag. Watching it, I felt the first true exhale, the kind that empties a room big enough to stand up in. My flip phone buzzed, a call routed through Damon's labyrinth of safe numbers. His update came like torque specs, precise, unembellished. Grant had buried himself under sports betting markers and margin calls on coins that promised rocket ships and delivered gravity. A short-term fintech loan was stacked on top, the kind that grows teeth if you miss a day. He'd also pushed a power of attorney that used my name to lien on my house. A traveling notary doctor, Leonard Pike, appeared on a video that looked clumsy enough to fool an algorithm, not a person. Elise, for her part, had dripped crypto into a wallet tied to the man in the olive jacket, and her social accounts held a neat queue of posts about my forgetfulness plus a draft obituary. Damon didn't sermonize. "You need both lanes," he said. Attorney General for elder exploitation and conspiracy, county prosecutor for the rest. I said, "Do it," and added, "No traffic on my main line." Then came the part that feels like lifting a car you know can fall, paperwork. In security, I sat with Morales and typed a statement precise enough to be furniture, the one-way itinerary with desk stamp, the receipt for the return flight I'd bought myself, the medical center reminder I never requested, the DNR uploaded without a physician's counter-signature printed with metadata, the slot machine sequence and hallway observations, the midnight raid, lubricant can, pics, and phone, the messages that told a man to stage gravity. Morales assigned an incident number, itemized evidence by container and handoff, and had Quinn notarize an affidavit of process that would travel with me. The room smelled faintly of toner and ocean, ink preparing to argue with water. I stepped onto the promenade for air that didn't belong to any building. What I felt wasn't victory, it was calibration. There is a point where you stop treating a loose bolt like a favor and start treating it like a hazard. That point had arrived. Trish joined me long enough to say, "Write your impact statement now while your voice is even." I kept it to dates, actions, and costs, the flights and time, the breach of trust, the safety measures I took to remain alive. Sentences that would stand on their own feet in a courtroom without leaning on tears. After lunch, I made the call I'd been rehearsing in the muscles. We used the security office's recorder. Morales announced the line. Grant answered with manufactured warmth. I didn't give him a ramp. I know about the one-way booking, I said. I know the scheduled posts, the crypto drips, the instructions you sent. The Coast Guard has your contractor and his phone. He tried denial, then grievance, then the soft plea. Dad, you're confused. I cut the bolt before it rounded. This morning I signed sworn statements. When we dock, the Attorney General and the County DA get the lot. Don't call me. Call a lawyer. My voice surprised me, calm, almost tired. Ending a thing often sounds like that. The loud parts have already happened. Post-call, the logistics returned like a checklist that refuses to be offended. I asked Damon to move on freezes and flags, financial institutions, title services, insurers, so no paperwork could slither through while I slept. We didn't discuss the deeper structure of my estate. Another day had been reserved for that reveal. For now, the aim was friction. Make it hard to pretend fraud is momentum. Trish read my draft statement and struck a flourish I didn't know I'd written. Plain bread, she said. Jurors eat that. Safety remained a job. I didn't set foot near cabin 847. Plainclothes security shadowed the hallway radius like patient planets. The panic fob chirped when Morales pinged it. I walked laps in camera country and learned the new map of my hours. Coffee here, library there, a bench where the sunlight felt like permission. When the anger rose, a flash flood in narrow canyons, I treated it like electricity and grounded it in tasks. Photocopy, label, back up, breathe. Toward evening, I stood forward on the windy deck, jacket zipped, the sea hard and silver as a tool chest. There is a loneliness baked into choosing law over loyalty, but the other choice is a worse one, to pretend that love excuses harm and to let that pretense hollow you out. The diver's whistle sat in my pocket, not as fear, but as policy. The papers in my folder had a similar weight. Between them, I could feel a life that might go on, clearing its own workspace. Captain Quinn found me there and told me we'd make Juneau early. The handoff would be clean at sunrise. Coast Guard, local PD, signed receipts, my affidavit in the outer sleeve. Then my flight, then a seat opposite a prosecutor with a clear desk and patient eyes. We've got you until the gangway, he said. I thanked him in the language we both trust. Specifically, back inside, I laid my pen across the folder and aligned it with the paper's edge. The habit soothed me. I had done the part that was mine to do. The rest would pass from hand to hand, signature to signature, until it reached a room whose decisions changed the future tense. Juneau rose out of a pewter morning like a docked idea. The ship eased against the pier and the day snapped from theory to procedure. Coast Guard officers came aboard in a small procession of windbreakers and purpose. Lieutenant Morales met them with the tidy authority of a ledger come to life. And Captain Quinn signed receipts that moved last night out of our hands without loosening it from our control. The security cell opened, Ryder Sloan changed geography, and a stack of sealed evidence bags, phone, pics, key card, lubricant, left under signatures that could be counted later. Chain of custody traveled the way a clean voltage does, visible, grounded, unambiguous. While cranes groaned and gulls argued about nothing, the internet remembered me. The scheduled posts from Elise began to drip into the world. A gentle joke about misplacing my keys, a photo of my empty driveway with a caption about Dad talking to himself again, a short clip that made my thoughtful pause in a grocery aisle look like confusion. People we know answered with emoji prayers and soft concern. I didn't engage. Trish sat beside me in the quiet corner of the cafe and screen captured each post, time, and link, then emailed the file list to herself and to the ship's security address so the preservation request would come from more than one witness. The impulse to defend myself rose and fell. Evidence doesn't need applause. Damon called from a number that will never be mine. His update was an audit laid end to end. The crypto trickle from Elise's wallet matched the times of the after-midnight messages on Ryder's phone. The power of attorney video bore the watermark of a mobile notarization platform now frozen for suspected misuse. The witnessing physician, Leonard Pike, had already had his account locked pending review. Grant's short-term credit was past fatigue and moving toward panic. He'd searched flight prices for cities with easy land crossings. Damon said, "Proceed," and the line went quiet. I told him something I had told no one, and I asked him to write it down. 3 months ago, when Grant's tone turned saccharine and helpful, I moved the house and the instruments of my old life into an irrevocable trust administered by an independent fiduciary with a lawyer whose handshake felt like a notary seal. Any transaction now requires 3 signatures, mine, the administrator's, and counsel's. The fake POA couldn't scratch it. The truth didn't soften what my son had tried, it only changed the math his plan depended on. Damon exhaled once. "We'll file the certificate of trust and the governing instrument pages with the AG and the DA," he said. That sentence steadied the room. We spent the next 2 hours in a choreography of friction. Damon sent freeze letters to banks and title services. I signed a request to flag any life insurance connected to my name for potential fraud if an opportunistic certificate appeared. Trish helped me format a preservation demand to the social platforms to hold the scheduled posts and the draft obituary we'd seen in writer's notes down to the last revision timestamp. Morales built me a traveling binder that looked like a closing packet at a dignified law firm, one-way itinerary with the desk stamp, my return ticket receipt, the medical center reminder I never requested, the printed DNR with uploader ID and time, photos of the hallway, the phone bank, and the bend where Trish heard the call, the video of the break-in, the tools, the message threads, the social schedule, the crypto ledger, the affidavits bearing Quinn's signature and the security log, my victim impact statement in plain bread sentences. I didn't return to cabin 847. Security tucked me into a crew area that smelled like detergent and discipline. I walked only where cameras watched and where the maps in my head overlapped with the ship's practical sight lines. Every 6 hours, Morales pinged my panic fob to make sure our little tether still hummed. The distance between a plan and a mistake felt measurable again. When the posts about my lapses reached cousins who hadn't called in years, a private sting went through me as neatly as a narrow nail. Shame is a clumsy emotion to carry when you've done nothing wrong, but it's the first coat many victims reach for. I let the coat pass me by. The whir of a printer from the security office, the wet stamp of a seal, the neat tilt of a signature, those were the sounds I trusted. You can't argue a bolt tight, you can only torque it to spec and test the wiggle. By late morning, the ship belonged to tourists again. I packed the binder, the flip phone, my notebook, and Claire's photo. Trish stood and hugged me the way nurses do, all competence wrapped around mercy. "Your paperwork is solid," she said. "Let it stand where you don't need to." Captain Quinn appeared long enough to shake my hand, eyes steady. "We keep you covered until the gangway," he said. It was a promise and a finish line. The airport was a small grammar of movement, belts, bins, boarding groups. I sat by a window with the binder on my lap and looked at clouds that didn't know me. Tomorrow would be a desk in Seattle, a prosecutor whose questions would come like careful taps on a stubborn part, and a second packet headed for the Attorney General's office under the heading Elder Exploitation and Conspiracy. I would describe what happened without adding weather to it. I would answer only what was asked. I would sign where the flags told me to sign. The page with Claire's photo felt warm from my hand. The trust I'd set up in silence was a quiet rebuke to a loud betrayal. The ship's wake had already braided itself back into the channel, and the posts about my confusion would become exhibit numbers instead of shadows. Outside, a jet shouldered itself into the sky with no sentiment at all. I didn't need sentiment from it. I needed lift, schedule, and a clean arrival. Which is to say, I needed the ordinary cadence of a life that keeps going after the dangerous part has been named. Seattle greeted me with wet light and the same old smell of jet fuel and coffee, ordinary enough to feel medicinal. Damon met me at the curb in a windbreaker that had more pockets than some apartments. He took the binder from my arm without ceremony and slid it into a weatherproof sleeve. We didn't waste words. The ride downtown was radio silent but not empty. I could feel the gears of a plan meshing somewhere just ahead of us. The King County Prosecutor's Office looked like it had been designed by someone who loved lines and hated surprises. We sat across from a deputy prosecutor and an investigator who introduced herself by last name only. I set the binder down and walked them through the ship-to-shore chain as if we were tracing a wiring diagram. The stamped one-way itinerary, the receipt for the return ticket I paid for, the medical center reminder I never requested, the printed DNR with metadata showing Elise's upload, the hallway photos and the wall phones, the midnight footage, the pics and lubricant, the messages, the scheduled social posts, the crypto drips. They asked for times. I had times. They asked for who had held what and when. I answered in sequence. When we finished, the prosecutor underlined 3 phrases on his legal pad: attempted murder, conspiracy, elder financial exploitation, and said, "We'll move." Paperwork accreted like frost. Damon slid me forms for a temporary restraining order against Grant and Elise, and a protective order to freeze my electronic medical record so no one could sneak another document into the chart. I signed where flags told me to sign. The investigator took custody of the thumb drive that mirrored Ryder's phone and logged it like a part pulled from a sealed crate. The office faxed subpoenas to the mobile notarization platform for the full log of the video session with the so-called Dr. Pike. The state health department opened a disciplinary file on him while I was still warming my hands on a cup of lobby coffee. "Don't call Pike," Damon said quietly in the elevator. "Let process do the talking." I nodded. A mechanic knows the danger of contaminating a clean surface. We drafted and then trimmed a public statement for my lawyer to hold until it was needed. A single paragraph saying I'm cooperating fully and I trust the process. No adjectives trying to earn their keep, no shadowboxing with the scheduled posts that had tried to paint me as confused. In parallel, Damon sent preservation letters to the social platforms to hold the posts, the drafts, and the IP logs that would stitch them to devices and hands. Back home, the garage smelled like me again. Old rubber, newer oil, a hint of cedar from the scrap shelf I never got around to turning into picture frames. I hung Claire's blue scarf back where it belongs, a gentle line above the workbench like a horizon. The diver's whistle took a place in the tray with the Torx bits. I wiped the bench twice, though it wasn't dirty, and made a checklist the way I did for kids in shop class. Sleep 8 if you can, walk after dinner, eat like a man who owes tomorrow his steadiness, call the group, show up. Oh, Trish phoned while Rain negotiated with the gutters. She didn't ask how I was. Nurses ask what's next. She emailed me a packet on elder safety, lock your credit, freeze your medical record, put a password on pharmacy refills, and invited me to listen in on a church group for folks over 50 who'd been circled for their money or their quiet. You can be anonymous, she said. You can just breathe and borrow a little steadiness. I said yes. Steadiness is sometimes a group project. Then the housework, the unglamorous kind that keeps your name from wandering. My trust lawyer met me in his office that smells like legal pads and rain. We changed locks, updated the beneficiary letter to reflect facts nobody would be allowed to edit, placed flags on. Rain thinned the courthouse steps into a gray ladder, each rung a careful footfall. Damon and I moved through security with the binder that had become a kind of prosthetic spine. The King County courtroom was wood and quiet, a room designed to make breath sound like a choice. I took a seat where I could see the counsel tables and the door the deputies used for defendants. When Ryder Sloan came in, he looked smaller than the olive jacket had made him, a man reduced to chain and schedule. The deputy prosecutor stacked our evidence like calibrated weights: the stamped one-way itinerary, the receipt for the return flight I bought myself, the medical reminder I never requested, the digital DNR printed with uploader ID and time, the hidden camera footage of my door, the tools, the message threads instructing a midnight slip from a balcony, the social media schedule and draft obituary, the crypto transfers. Grant and Elise sat 2 chairs apart, a space as neat as a diagram. The judge read the charges with the even cadence of a torque wrench: attempted murder, conspiracy, elder financial exploitation, wire fraud. I recognized the sensation in my chest, a click that said the tool had engaged. Arraignment moved like a conveyor that knows its route. Not guilty pleas came first, automatic as early rain. The prosecutor outlined why bail should be high and passports surrendered. The judge agreed, penciling conditions that turned air into boundaries. No contact orders landed like clean, hard gaskets. No calls, no messages, no third-party outreach. I felt the room exhale in a shared understanding that paper, when used properly, can be a kind of wall. Negotiations began on a different floor, but the building keeps its gravity. Ryder's lawyer asked to speak. A plea offer appeared with edges and numbers. He would plead to attempted murder in the second degree and conspiracy in exchange for truthful testimony about the people who hired him. I watched his shoulders drop by a fraction, the posture of a man who knows that the next door will open, but not to daylight. He took the deal. The Pike matter ran parallel like an unseen conduit. The state medical board had already suspended his license pending investigation. The mobile notarization platform delivered logs that made the video call look like a puppet show. The doctor's lawyer signaled cooperation. The prosecutor described a likely resolution. A felony conviction with a suspended sentence, a long bar from practice, mandatory ethics education. It was a reminder that systems fail when people sell their signatures and that failure leaves fingerprints. Evidence hearings tested the chain we built at sea. Captain Quinn and Lieutenant Morales testified to capture, imaging, and seals. The hidden camera clip played without theatrics, gloves, keycard, rail, can, arrest. The audio captured Ryder's line about following instructions, and the judge allowed it as an admission against interest. The social timeline stood up on its legs too. IP logs matched the Barrett home, and the draft obituary came in as a contemporaneous plan rather than a sad curiosity. The crypto ledger knitted the strands with numbers that don't blush. The trust I had created months earlier came into the record with the tidy authority of notarized pages. The independent administrator explained the three-signature rule and how a forged power of attorney cannot pierce an irrevocable instrument. Banks and insurers confirmed freezes and flags. The county recorder noted blocks on title changes. The judge said little, which in court is sometimes the loudest form of agreement. When it came time for sentencing, the room changed temperature. Ryder received 12 years and a tale of intensive supervision. He was ordered to repay forensic costs, a small and exacting justice that says evidence has a price and so does the work of preserving it. Elise took 6 years on conspiracy, wire fraud, and exploitation, plus 5 on probation, restitution, and a permanent no-contact order. She kept her eyes on the table where hands go when they cannot lift anything else. Grant stood last. The prosecutor spoke softly about sons and thresholds and the particular cruelty of dressing an attack in the clothes of an accident. The defense tried words about stress and debt and a man who panicked. The judge looked at the messages, then at me, then at the camera still of the rail. Grant changed posture without changing shape and entered a no-contest plea to attempted murder in the second-degree conspiracy and elder exploitation. 16 years, classes, permanent no contact. He nodded once, as if acknowledging torque he could neither loosen nor break. I read my victim impact statement as if I were reciting instructions I'd written for a younger mechanic. I kept to dates, actions, and the cost of staying alive. I said I had chosen process over revenge because process had kept me from falling off a ship and because process lets other people stand where I am standing. I did not name our old holidays or the way his laugh had sounded at 6. When Grant asked to speak, I looked at the grain of the bench in front of me and let the order the judge had signed do its quiet work. When the formalities ended, a press officer from the prosecutor's office asked for a brief statement. I agreed to one paragraph. I said that planning, documentation, cameras, and a calm ally saved my life, that elder safety is a civic skill set, not a slogan, that I trusted the system because we had fed it good food, timestamps, logs, signatures. They released their own statement naming the case a model of digital evidence and chain of custody discipline. It felt like watching a clean weld cool to strength. Back home, the garage smelled of oil and lemon cleaner. I hung Claire's blue scarf over the pegboard where my best wrenches live. The diver's whistle went beside the torque spits. I wiped the bench with the patience I used to teach, line by line, until the wood shone like an honest sentence. The anger that had once lit me like a flare now folded into order. Lists, locks, letters, a gate that closes because it should. Evening rain found the roof and made a sound I had learned to hear as forward motion. Somewhere past the wall, neighbors cooked and argued and laughed about ordinary things. I wrote the first items of a new checklist. Teach a Saturday workshop on safety for the over 50 crowd, volunteer with the church group Trish had mentioned, finish the pamphlet Damon suggested. Checklist for Aging in America, with pages on passwords, proxies, and the value of a good notebook. The dangerous chapter was over. The repairs could begin. A year later, autumn comes in like a clean breath. Bellingham's skies clear after rain and the cedar darkens to a deeper, truer green. I unlock the garage and let the cool air roll across the bench. The pegboard is tidy, wrenches by size, oils by weight, labels square to the shelf. Claire's blue scarf hangs where it can catch a draft and move just enough to register as company. On Saturdays, a hand-lettered sign swings over the door. Community shop. Safety and dignity. 50 plus. It isn't fancy. It's a metronome. Restitution shows up as direct deposits with placeholder names and quiet decimals. The prosecutor's email uses phrases like remitted and satisfied in part. I file the notices without reading them twice. Dr. Pike's order arrives in a public bulletin, license suspended long-term, ethics courses, supervised practice barred. I staple it to a folder called Sunset Items and put it on the shelf that means finished. Some endings aren't applause, they're the sound of a drawer closing. The workshop starts at 9 with coffee that could remove paint and a circle of folding chairs that learn to stop their wobble. We begin always with process. I pass around index cards printed with my checklist, timestamp, camera copy, confirm. We talk about two-factor authentication, burner email, geotags set to off by default. I show them how to photograph a document with the edges visible and the clock on the same screen. We go over medical directives that hold up in daylight, valid DNRS, health proxies with signatures that belong to living professionals. We practice saying no to free drinks and yes to bright hallways. I hold up a diver's whistle and let it chirp once. People smile the way a city does when a stoplight works. Trish visits the first day the church group sends their elders. She watches me lay out the A to B of a crisis with the economy nurses admire. When a student asked how to tell the difference between fear and caution, Trish says, "Caution gives you options." Damon drops by 2 weeks later with a suggestion to turn the class into a short book. "Give it away under the AG's letterhead," he says. We outline chapters at the bench, pages labeled in pencil. Paper, people, places, phone. A pamphlet can be a life jacket if it's in the right drawer. I meet with the trust administrator and my lawyer once each quarter. We update beneficiary letters to reflect the world I'm actually living in. We seed a small fund for scholarships that pay for steel-toed boots and safety glasses, gifts for older hands that want to keep learning without asking permission. The three-signature rule has become something more than a legal mechanism. It's a philosophy I teach without naming it. Good systems require more than one person's mood. Some days I drive down to the bay and let the line of the horizon do its quiet work. I keep a whistle in my pocket because keeping it is easier than deciding whether to bring it. I blow one short note toward the water and set a single daisy afloat. "We kept our promise in our way," I tell Claire. The words land with the weight of a wrench seated in a bolt. Flush, true enough. People from the class begin to bring me their small victories. A woman shows me a printout of her new health proxy, countersigned properly. A retired longshoreman holds up a battered phone with two-factor turned on and 4 backup codes in his wallet. A widower says, I changed my route to the pharmacy. There are 3 cameras on the new one. I nod like a foreman who knows that progress inches then holds. The letter from my son arrives on a Wednesday inside a plain envelope that is learned not to expect to be opened. He doesn't ask to be forgiven. He asked for a copy of the checklist for his re-entry class. The air in the garage shifts a degree the way a room does when someone stands up. I set the letter down without letting it vanish under sentiment. I print the booklet, staple it twice, and slide it into a manila envelope for his lawyer. On the flap, I write a single line: process keeps people safer. It isn't absolution, it's a tool he can choose to pick up. The community shop grows into its shape. We add a small station for phone hygiene and a magnifier lamp for reading tiny type. I hang a laminated sheet titled "If You Need Help Tonight" with numbers arranged by urgency. On the back wall, I pin a map of the neighborhood and mark the routes with the most eyes. The students begin to bring their own additions: colored tabs, lists for medications, reminders to call a friend before long trips. There is pride in a room that knows where its exits are. I keep the binder from the case on a high shelf, not hidden, not displayed. Sometimes a newcomer asks about it. That's a story we don't need today, I say, and turn the conversation toward the socket sets. Living forward is not the same as forgetting. It's remembering what information to keep at hand and what to let the archive carry. On the anniversary of the arraignment, the prosecutor emails me a final docket note. All appeals denied, orders made permanent. I file it in sunset items and sweep the floor. Rain starts on the roof, a light tapping that finds its beat. The class ends at noon with checklists tucked into pockets and a line at the coffee urn. Trish waves from the doorway, palm pressed to her heart, our signal that the system worked one more time. I pull the door down on its track and listen for the click that says closed, not stuck. The scarf stirs on the pegboard and settles. The whistle rests beside the torque spits. A life doesn't become safe because danger ran out of ideas. It becomes safer because you torque to spec every time you're given the chance. I set tomorrow's sign on the workbench, face up, ready. Then I turn out the light and step into evening, a man who learned that dignity can be measured, logged, and taught until it becomes muscle. In the end, what survives isn't the noise of a scheme, but the quiet of a record, dates that align, signatures that hold, a chain of custody that does not flinch under light. Justice rarely arrives with fanfare. It comes as small, disciplined choices, saying no to the easy story, yes to the harder truth, choosing process over impulse, evidence over echo. There is a lesson in that order. Safety is not a mood, it's a practice. Dignity is not a gift, it's a habit. Walk the well-lit hallway, stand where cameras can see, keep a whistle close, not out of fear, but out of respect for time. Paperwork is not cold, it is mercy written down. A good form is a handrail on a dark deck. Forgiveness, too, changes shape. It can mean refusing to be defined by harm while refusing to excuse it. It can mean building boundaries that keep tomorrow intact. The heart does not heal by pretending. It heals by telling the truth carefully and then living forward under its protection. The world stays messy and beautiful, capable of failure and repair. But steadiness is available to anyone willing to do the simple things well, again and again. In that steadiness, grief softens into gratitude for people who stand where it matters. The professional who knows which box to check, the neighbor who notices the wrong detail, the stranger who says, "I'm here." We do not pick the storms, but we can decide which anchors to carry. Documentation, community, and a calm voice can turn a dangerous night into a clear morning. With time, the map of a life redraws itself, not erasing hard water, only marking a safer lane. Take the lesson with you. Torque to spec every time. Keep the list, make the copy, ask for the second signature. Say no to the drink you didn't pour. Tell someone where you're going and why. Choose the path that trades convenience for clarity. That's not paranoia, it's wisdom with work boots on. It's how ordinary days stay ordinary, and how a person steps into evening with a quieter mind. If this story stirred something in you, add your voice to the conversation. Share what resonated, what surprised you, or what you teach someone you love about staying safe and standing tall. Leave a comment below, and if these reflections matter to you, please subscribe and turn on notifications so you'll know when the next story arrives. Your presence makes this community more watchful, more compassionate, and more prepared. Thank you for being here and for choosing in your own life the steady courage that keeps people safe.